Okay. Thank you, and good morning. It's so wonderful to be here in Grand Rapids, so wonderful to be here at Grand Valley State University. This is our second year here, and it's so, we're based in Chicago. We come up and we've been able over the last couple of years to make these wonderful connections here. And whenever I come into Grand Rapids and into Grand Valley State, it seems to be on a gorgeous day. The sun's coming down, golden, shining off these beautiful orange brick buildings and the green tint, and I was over at the and the river, and just gorgeous. Grand Rapids is just such a beautiful place. And I was over at the Allendale campus a couple weeks ago, and all of the same beautiful buildings, and then you think, wow, Grand Rapids, Grand Valley State, all of the sustainability work that's going on, all of the LEED buildings, and it makes everything that much more beautiful. So we're really, really pleased to be here. I'm Gary Cuneen, Executive Director of 7 Generations Ahead, and on behalf of John Harris and A5 Group, Inc., our co-producer and partner for Greentown and Future Cities, welcome to Future Cities in Greentown. A little bit about 7 Generations Ahead for those of you who are not familiar with our work and our organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Very smart that we partnered with a for-profit organization to put on Greentown. And what we do is actually work on a variety of advocacy, education, and implementation projects that promote sustainable communities. So we develop comprehensive planning initiatives that incorporate baseline metrics and strategy development, community engagement, and communications and reporting. We do conferences and forums like Greentown. We develop programs around implementation strategies related to green building, local foods, and waste reduction. And so Greentown for us is a great opportunity to continue our mission and promote the work that we think is most important for our communities. Our partner A5, a great brand consultancy based in Chicago and Grand Rapids and St. Louis, is just a wonderful partner, and we're really grateful for them and all the work that they do to help make this conference such a strong event. Special thanks to John Harris. Jill Armstrong has been really the leader in charge of all of this, and if you could just take a moment to give Jill a big round of applause, and John for their work. And when we produce these conferences, we also engage additional partners, and we've been really fortunate to work with the City of Grand Rapids through the leadership of Mayor Heartwell and through his staff, and in particular Haas, who's been a key planning partner with us for this initiative, and with Grand Valley State, with Norm Christopher, who actually spoke at our inaugural Greentown conference in 2007 in Oak Park, and we've maintained that relationship until now, and so it's really been a valuable opportunity to work with Norm and Grand Valley State University here. We've also had the opportunity to work with many of the community sustainability partnerships. We were able to kick off Greentown yesterday with a 3-hour session that focused on alternative and renewable energy and energy efficiency, and really exploring ways that these community sustainability partnerships can work together, can collaborate across communities to develop some programs, projects, strategies that can help move the alternative energy and renewable energy and efficiency agenda forward. And just a great meeting yesterday. Some wonderful presenters and folks that were really committed to figuring out ways to really define what a future collaboration might look like. And, that's a really big part of what we try to do with Greentown. It's an educational conference, of course. We want to make sure that by the end of the day, you're leaving with sustainable best practices across a broad range of areas, from local food to zero waste to energy efficiency and renewables to transportation to green cities and everything that makes a city green. And so we want to make sure that all of that education happens, But even more importantly, we want to make sure that there are action and planning components that Greentown can help to spur, to kick off. And so yesterday's meeting with the CSPs was a really important part of the work that we're doing here. And so thanks to all of the Community Sustainability Partnership members who helped to plan and implement that event. It was a great day and a great way to start the conference. In past Green Towns, now this is our sixth. We started in 2007. We've done them in Oak Park, Illinois, in Aurora, Illinois, in Lake County, Illinois, and then in Grand Rapids and Chicago, and now our second time in Grand Rapids. What we try to do is bring together municipal and private sector and community leaders, decision makers, and bring them together to learn about best practices and learn to develop collaborations and move this work forward. This particular conference, at the request of Mayor Heartwell, was organized in a way that we could actually bring together Michigan mayoral signatories of the U.S. Climate Agreement and have a special track that would actually focus on energy and moving that agenda forward among Michigan cities. And so we're really pleased to have that be a core element of this Greentown, and a special welcome to all the mayors in Michigan who are signatories of the U.S. Climate Agreement. Thank you for your leadership with that initiative. So a few other people to thank. I'm going to thank the community side. John will thank our corporate sponsors. Of course, the City of Grand Rapids and Grand Valley State University. Also, the Michigan Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth is here as a community partner. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Environment. The Michigan Municipal League, and then also we've worked with, over the past couple of years, the West Michigan U.S. Green Building Council chapter. And thank you to all of those. Please give a round of applause for all of their work to make Greentown happen. At the end of the day, if we're successful, you're going to take home some best practices, you're going to take home some new ideas, and you're going to develop at least one new partnership, one new collaborator that you're going to go back to your community and work with. And if that happens, we'll consider Greentown a big success. We hope you have an excellent day. Please join us at the end of the day and tip a glass with us for our microbrew reception at the end of the day. A great time to network and to build some of those collaborations. And I just wish you the best for an exciting day at Greentown and future cities. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce John Harris, principal of A5 Group, Inc., who's going to walk us through the day. John?
Thank you, Gary.
Yep.
Again, thank you, and please a round of applause to Gary Cuneen and 7 Generations Ahead. Gary didn't talk enough about his work, but Gary, along with the Delta Institute, and A5 is part of that too, is creating a community sustainability plan for Oak Park and River Forest in Chicago, and starting to work with a number of communities and creating community sustainability plans that will allow, if you have the plan, if you have the vision, then you can implement and you can do it strategically. So Gary and his folks at 7 Generations Ahead are doing fantastic work across the Midwest. Gary mentioned before I forget this, Gary mentioned where we've been. There are a few places we hope to go. We have 3 representatives from the city of Toledo here this morning, and we're hoping to take Greentown over the border into the great state of Ohio. Not quite as great state as Michigan, but not bad, all things considered. Sorry, Tim. And we will be in Chicago October 13th and 14th as well. And Mayor Daley, the soon-to-depart Mayor Daley, will be speaking there, along with Suzanne Malik McKenna, Commissioner, Department of Environment, and our keynote speaker, Philippe Cousteau, who will talk about the importance of water, our oceans, our Great Lakes, and our friends here, John Coaches from the Annis Water Research Institute at Grand Valley State, obviously doing great work to protect, defend, improve our water quality and our water quantity. By the way, did anybody see the news news this morning, last night, that not only has the company that dumped oil into the river, into the Kalamazoo River, there's an oil spill over in Chicago as of yesterday as well. So again, we keep seeing evidence of the need to defend our environment, but also create ways to develop healthy, sustainable communities. So hopefully we could see you in Chicago, October 13th and 14th. Just a note on Mayor Daley. Gary is not running for mayor. I'm not running for mayor, but everybody else in the city now is. And Mayor Chavez, who will be speaking in a few minutes, former mayor of Albuquerque, we might have called him, no offense, we might have called him the greenest mayor in America before he left office. Mayor Daley might have assumed that mantle, and now with his departure, it is clearly Mayor Heartwell's mantle to assume. So we now have in our midst the greenest mayor in America as of today, if you want to take it. And I'd be happy to tell Mayor Daley that you've taken it now. Okay, great. Great. You don't want to tell him, I'll tell him. Right? And but as soon as he's gone, I think he'd officially abdicate that to you. So a few thank yous again. Gary thanked our partners. So Haas, Renee from USGBC, all of the planning team. There's many of them out there, and if I name you all, I know I'll forget somebody, and somebody will be angry with me. So I'll make all of you angry with me, and I apologize. But there's been a tremendous core planning team here over the last year, and it's been wonderful to work with each of you. Norm Christopher, Haas, Renee Hesselink from USGBC. So thank you again to all of you folks. I'm going to run down this list, so try not to nod off, but they are important. We wouldn't be here if not for these sponsors. Aquinas College. We mentioned Grand Valley State University. President Haas will be here in a minute. Aquinas College does have a new Master of Sustainable Business, so any of you who are thinking of going back to get another degree and a Master's in Sustainable Business, it's a brand new program. You could see Greg and Nanette over on that side. They'd be happy to talk with you about it. Consumers Energy. Very important. Thank you for being here yesterday and today. East Jordan Ironworks, a company that's 1883. That's, I guess, sustainable, what you'd call sustainable. So, and doing some wonderful things. They'll be outside as well. The folks from Fishbeck, Thompson, Carr, and Huber. Thank you for joining us. The Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce has been supportive in promoting this event. And the Holiday Inn Grand Rapids downtown, not a new property, but has done wonderful things in greening that property and bringing it to be a high-quality spot to stay. We all stayed there, and it's a wonderful spot, and they've been very generous. MI Biz, Joe Boomgard, editor, back. Joe's back in the corner. I come from Chicago. Gary does. We spend a lot of time here. I've said it before, I'll say it again. My top reading list every day, week, New York Times, The Economist, MI Biz, Crane's Chicago Business. So I think that's good company, and we applaud you for the work you guys do to cover, Michigan and business and sustainability, and continue to push to push that forward. So thank you, Joe. Pioneer Construction, thank you. Pizzo and Associates Ecological Restoration, Progressive AE, back with us again. Quest Sustainable Solutions, which is part of Cascade Engineering. The Rockford Companies, Roger is here somewhere. Roger Rieckhoff, thank you for your support. Saracen Farms, which is a conservation community being developed west of Chicago. None of you are leaving West Michigan, but if you know anybody who's looking for a new place, a zero-energy home on a 410-acre farm in Chicago, we'd love to talk to you about that. And then, last but not least, the Kellogg Foundation and the Wege Foundation. And if not for foundations, like Kellogg and like Wege, in particular, Peter Wege, I know there are a lot of friends of Peter's here in this room. I've known Peter since about 2002, so far shorter period of time than many of you folks. I've spent far less time with Peter than you, but he is personally one of my true heroes because he knows what he believes in, and he does what he thinks is right. And so we're very, very appreciative that we've had the support of Peter and Terry and Ellen and the rest of the Wege Foundation. And we should all be grateful for the work that Peter has done on behalf of Grand Rapids and West Michigan. And if you'd like a copy of the second edition of his book, Economicology 2, it is out in the hallway, and we'll have those available afterwards. And again, a testament to Peter and his support of people and of Grand Rapids and West Michigan and the environment. This is a brand new book. You are probably seeing this for the first time. It'll actually be officially unveiled at the Grand Rapids Art Museum next Tuesday. It's called Super Youper. It is about a powerless superhero, and I think that's important, a powerless superhero, a Youper, and I use that term affectionately, who is a proud defender of the environment and the Great Lakes. And this book was drawn by Mark Heckman. You may know Mark's story. Mark unfortunately passed away in May, and his co-conspirator, Mark Newman, and we will be, the Wege Foundation funded the publishing of this book, and we'll be launching it here in the next Tuesday, and copies of Super Youper are available. And if you like, let me just show you this. Peter's book has a lot of words. Okay, I'm not going to find a lot of words. So this is for Norman, all right, because it has a lot of words. And then this one has a lot of pictures. So this is for Mayor Heartwell? Okay, sure. You did point to yourself. For the record, he pointed to himself first. He said, go for it. So, and I'm not as afraid of you as I am of Mayor Daley, for the record. Just, I need you to know that, okay? Even though you're in office. So, few logistics. This morning we'll be here until noon. If you are with Mayor Heartwell's group at 11 a.m., you'll follow his trusted assistant, Jane Bush, and you will meet her at the bottom of the stairs out here and follow along to that meeting at 11 o'clock. If you are going to the ICLEI meeting, that is also at 11 o'clock, and you will meet Laura at the registration desk out here. If you need the washrooms, they're out there. All of our sponsors, all of our lunch, all of our breaks will be right out here, and all of our afternoon sessions will be just past the registration desk. We'll be in here for one track, and then there are 3 tracks over there. 2 of the rooms are easy to find. The third one we hit on you, room 202. We'll have some people to take you around to the backside so that you can enter room 202. But everything is essentially right here. So that's enough of me. That's enough of that. Thank you for your attention. Again, we're honored to be here, as Gary said, not only in Grand Rapids and in West Michigan, but to have a wonderful partner in Grand Valley State University. And one of the things that impresses all of us about Grand Valley State University and about the leadership of Tom Haas, whom I'm about to bring up here in a second, is that sustainability is something that he's believed in and been a part of for 30 plus years. He was up in Alaska with the Exxon Valdez spill. He was a member in the Coast Guard, in the military, and in his 5-year tenure so far, and in the 50 years at Grand Valley State University, he's only the 4th president, and he's been here 5 years, but sustainability has moved from being something that folks talked about to a strategy to a culture. And I think that's in large part to his leadership in making sure that sustainability is not just a buzzword, it's not greenwash, it is part of everyday campus life for administration, for faculty, for students, and for future generations. So, the Detroit Free Press, named him one of the 16 leaders in West Michigan, and again, we think he's a true leader, not only at the university level, but from a community standpoint in creating a healthy and sustainable Grand Rapids and West Michigan. So, I'd like you to welcome President Tom Haas.
Thank you and good morning. It's a great day in the neighborhood, as I could say, and there was a Laker blue sky, if anyone saw that today. Mayor, didn't you see that?
It's so unusual.
Oh, it's great to see that. November will be here soon. Well, we're really honored to have you here at Grand Valley State University at the Eberhard Center, and to have this connection that we have with you, and that is to look ahead. To look ahead, because it is incumbent upon us as leaders to be good stewards. And I have three watchwords that I use in my day-to-day operations when we make decisions, and one of them, of course, is relevance, and I can't think of any other topic that's more relevant to us than sustainability. Service. We're providing that in all the contexts that we have, whether it be in the profit or the not-for-profit, in the public sector or the private sector. We are providing that particular service, especially when it comes to the third of those watchwords, and that's stewardship. We have an obligation, I think it's a moral obligation, to create the environment that we want for the generations ahead. And I saw it this summer. I have four granddaughters. And we had them up to our cottage. When you're in West Michigan, and we've been here now in our 5th year, we got our cottage on the lake. It happens to be Thomas Lake, appropriate. But we had the 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we wanted to go fishing. Well, I don't have any motors on my boats. It's kayaks, and it's a rowboat, and it's a pedal boat. And we went out fishing. Well, in order to do fishing, you have to get some worms, correct? Well, we did. We went over to Myers, and in a small container for about $2.99, you got probably a half dozen worms. Well, great. Well, we didn't know how the girls were going to take to this, but they took to it very well. They started pulling the worms out of the soil and giving them names. And then they were lining them up on the dining room table and doing races. Now, take a look at that picture, though. In my mind, they were looking at this earth. And they were looking at it with the idea of enjoying our world. And I just, that's a mental picture that I will always have. And they didn't have any problems when they went out fishing. They caught a couple of sunfish, and that was pretty exciting. And of course, we put them back. We're protecting. But I do think it's important to understand that that's why we're here. Well, Grand Valley State University is kicking off its 50th year. As mentioned, I'm in my 5th year of that history. And we have embraced the nature of sustainability. And we are developing it as a cultural norm for our students and the faculty and the future state that we believe we have responsibilities to shape. And Grand Valley State University kicked off its academic year about a week ago. We got our official numbers, and we now have grown for 28 straight years. We're now at 24,541 students. Some of the best students you'd ever want, because 96% of them come from the great state of Michigan. But more importantly than that, as good as the students are, we have to make sure that they leave Grand Valley State University with the degree that we want them to have and what they want to have. That's a relevance piece. And that last year, we also hit a record high number of graduates of almost 4,900 graduates. 90% over the last 2 years now of graduation classes, 90% are going to grad school or are employed in Michigan. I think that is a great statement of how Grand Valley started many years ago with the confidence of others who looked to Grand Valley State University as a way to develop talent for this region and beyond, because we now have 75,000 graduates over those 50 years, and over 50,000 of them live right here in West Michigan. So those are types of numbers that I want to look at as an outcome. The input side is great. It's the outcome that I think we are all wanting to see, and that's sustainability, again, for Grand Valley State University is one of those outcomes that we want. We've been recognized by a few folks in this whole adventure of sustainability. In fact, it's kind of neat, 2 years ago, we were named as one of the top 25 higher educational institutions in the Kaplan Guide as environmentally responsible and cutting-edge green colleges. We do that with curriculum. We do that with our LEED certified buildings. And I think right now we have 15 of them, and we're going to build 2 more that are very, very important to us, a new Learning and Information Commons, our library in Allendale, and a new building right here to house the Seidman College of Business in Grand Rapids. We also are listed in the Peterson's Green Jobs for a New Economy. That's the outcome that I'm talking about. We're top 50 four-year schools with great green programs, it reports. In summary, I do think that as we look ahead, and that's what we're doing, that Grand Valley State University, with its strong roots in the public-private sector, the relationships we have with Mayor Heartwell and the city of Grand Rapids, and many across West Michigan, we're just proud to be part of this community, this growing community, this sustainable community that is looking ahead. And I know that I'm looking ahead at Grand Valley for the next 50 years. And how are we going to be positioned to serve the future generations? So when my granddaughters have their children coming to Grand Valley State University, they can look back and say, there was a legacy that Grand Valley was supporting the future state. And I do like the idea of the 7 generations as we look ahead in that context. So what we're looking at is really taking and understanding that there's lifestyles to be changed, there's opportunities for us, and most important, in my mind, I like the fact that when I involve myself with some of the students at Grand Valley State University, many of them are pushing us to create that environment for their children, and we have to listen. Just like my grandkids taking a look at those worms and playing with that, they're creating for themselves a future. We need to do this all together. So I welcome you again to Grand Valley State University and to this opportunity we have to learn from one another. And now it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our mayor, the Honorable George Heartwell. George welcomed my wife and I here within the first week or two on the campus. Remember, George, we were right over here on one of the bridges. And we've had a great relationship to date as we, again, work together on behalf of the state, on behalf of the city, on behalf of the university to create this sustainable community. And George is now in his second term. He really has embraced this notion of sustainable practices from not just the triple bottom line, but more importantly from the cultural aspects too. And that's what I really appreciate in George, because in my mind, and I've lived in lots of cities in my career in the Coast Guard and government service and in academics, and I visited lots of campuses throughout the nation and the world. I don't think there's a better mayor than George Heartwell. George, please.
Very kind. Thank you. President Haas, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for hosting us here. Indeed, the relationship between the city of Grand Rapids and Grand Valley State University is an extraordinary one. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes, but it doesn't It doesn't happen by accident. I talk to colleague mayors around the country, and when we're talking about, mayors get together, mayors who are here, and we brag about our cities, and we talk about things we're doing, and it's always interesting to me when we talk about relationship with the university here in Grand Rapids, or with our private colleges or our community college, how light bulbs go on in people's heads. Most mid or large cities have some higher education presence in their community, and yet few have made the connection between municipal government and higher education. And for us, I want to say it's been a great experience. Tom and Marcia have become close personal friends in their tenure here in Grand Rapids. May it last for the next 50 years, Mr. President. But the relationship goes beyond that to an institutional relationship between the city and the university. So thank you so much, and thank you for hosting us here. Gary and John did such an effective job of thanking everyone that I can skip the entire first part of my presentation here, which is a very good thing because John cut 7 minutes into my time. Yeah, thank you, John. I'll make you fear me like you fear daily. So let me just say that we truly live in some extraordinary times, don't we, today? Those of us in this room have never experienced an economy like the economy that we experience today. As I'm looking around, even with the gray hairs that I see in the room, none of us have known an economy like this one. And certainly those of us in the state of Michigan are experiencing an economy it's like standing on the edge of a precipice looking down into a bottomless void, it seems sometimes, in our state. It's an extraordinary time in many other ways. We are coming to grips with the fact that climate change is a reality, and no matter what one's theory of climate change may be, the fact of the matter is we are experiencing changes, fundamental changes in climate in this country, and that will last for generations to come. And so as I think those of us who have been engaged in environmental work have considered the word adaptation a bit of a dirty word, as it feels like waving the white flag. And yet the fact of the matter is we are already being forced in cities all over this country to adapt to climate change, as it's affecting us with record rainfalls, with heat waves in our city that are in many cases even claiming lives, with changes in the rural areas of crop cycles. We simply need to address the whole question of adaptation. We need to identify vulnerabilities and begin to work on matters of adaptation. I'm very pleased that joining us today is former MDEQ director. Where are you, Steve? Steve Chester over here, who has been quite actively engaged since his retirement from the state and his work with Foley and Lardner law firm, quite actively engaged in some work around adaptation planning. So thank you for that work, Steve, and thank you for being here. This is an extraordinary time in other ways. A legislature at the state level and increasingly at the federal level that seems deadlocked, unable to act. And what is most troubling to me, a resurgence globally of intolerance and bigotry and hatred, often along racial or religious lines. and yet this is also a remarkable time as well for the level of innovation that we experience. This is a rich time of innovation, and change is coming at us, and it's coming at us rapidly. And there's I think the opportunity that represents for us is enormous. It's a time that demands new leadership in all areas, leadership that is visionary, that's bold, that's creative, but beyond what leadership has been in the past, it has to be leadership that is inclusive, that embraces the different, that brings people to the table to solve some of these intractable problems that we have. And so I think it's also leadership that must be committed to the triple bottom line, to sustainability. So we're gathered here in this quite extraordinary time, I think, of challenge and opportunity, of time that we both fear and embrace. We're gathered here to learn from each other, to share experiences and to share best practices, leading practices, to look for opportunities to collaborate among ourselves, and certainly to encourage one another in the work we're doing. I get the opportunity, because I've got the microphone, to say a little bit about Grand Rapids. For some of you who may be visiting us for the first time or may have been casual visitors in the past, let me talk a bit about our dedication in this city to sustainability. When I took office in 2004, one of the first things I did was to throw out the city's strategic plan and say to staff, we're no longer going to do strategic planning. What? We're not going to do strategic planning? We're going to do sustainability planning. Okay, Mayor, what's a sustainability plan, and how do we do it? And since I didn't have a clue what a sustainability plan was or how to go about crafting one, we went to partners in the community. We went to institutions that have lots of smart people in them, like Grand Valley State University, Grand Rapids Community College, Aquinas College, and the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And among the five of us, we created something called the Community Sustainability Partnership. Our goal, our purpose, was to assist one another in developing sustainability plans, implementing those plans, and then hold one another accountable for the implementation and the measurement of success on those plans. From that relatively a small and humble beginning, we have grown now to over 190 members of this Community Sustainability Partnership, many of you in the audience today. An important partnership for us here in Grand Rapids, and it's provided for us an opportunity to reach out to communities throughout West Michigan and even beyond the state lines to assist in developing sustainability partnerships. Our dedication to the triple bottom line is evident in economic development. We are in the process, like so many cities, urban centers in the Midwest and in the northern part of the United States, we're committed to rebuilding what was an old manufacturing economy, not by throwing out manufacturing, but by embracing principles of advanced manufacturing, but also building capacity in other sectors. In our case, health sector, health research, health education, as well as higher education as a whole, with now 13 colleges or universities with either principal or satellite presence here in our city. We've come to realize that not only is higher education important for quality of life, but it's a key piece of a local economy. We're rebuilding our economy along with emphasis on knowledge and on building the the knowledge sector. Environmentally, we are paying attention to water, to air, to soil. With respect to water, I hope you've spent some time along the Grand River here. If we've got a lovely 3.8-mile river walk, if you've got a chance before you leave town to just walk the Grand River. Breathe deeply while you do that. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, you wouldn't want to have breathed deeply, especially after a rainfall. We had a record in our most shameful year of a 12 billion gallon total annual discharge of combined sewer overflow into the Grand River. The Grand River flows out to Lake Michigan. We bring our drinking water from Lake Michigan. With a little encouragement from the EPA, we set about fixing that problem, and I'm pleased to say that as we are here today, $240 million later, 93% of it local money, we have solved 99.6% of that problem, and we continue with the remaining elements of our combined sewer separation. The Grand River has become a quality fishery, one of the top urban fisheries in the nation, and listed by Fly Fisherman Magazine as number 6 for urban rivers in America as a fishery. And we're in the process right now of the early design work for a whitewater kayak course downtown, which we think is going to be kind of fun. The river is a place you want to be today instead of one that you want to avoid. With respect to air quality, we've achieved 21% now renewable in the city's portfolio. We have set the modest goal of 100% renewable by the year 2020. I believe that's fully achievable, and we are actively and aggressively working on achieving that. Transit is another area where cities are able to work on issues of air quality. And I'm pleased that our multi-jurisdictional transit authority, 6 cities that form that authority, is a national award winner as a transit agency, and expanding and growing with double-digit ridership growth each year for the past 2001, 9 years. With respect to soil, we're certainly aggressive with the use of brownfield redevelopment tools that are available to us. I think that former Director Chester would concur that Grand Rapids is one of the leading cities in the state in terms of using that tool that's available. We've figured out how to make it work, and it's working well for us. With respect to the social bottom line, I'd point to the challenges that we have, as do so many urban centers, with public education or public schools, with 82% poverty in the Grand Rapids public school system. There are enormous challenges, but city and schools are working together in partnerships the way we have never worked before to address that. We have committed ourselves to homeless elimination as part of the commitment and pledge of the U.S. Conference of Mayors to end homelessness in a decade. We've got 4 years left in that pledge. We better start working hard, but it's certainly been challenging. But we've implemented new systems, new methods to make sure that people, A, don't slip into homelessness, and B, if they happen to, that we get them out of that situation as quickly as possible. Lead poisoning has been another area where I think our community has recognized an enormous problem and is addressing it in a collaborative effort of government, private sector, and the healthcare community. The result of work we've done here in Grand Rapids, as I think was mentioned previously, Grand Rapids was the nation's first designated regional center for expertise in education for sustainable development by the United Nations University. And recently I went to Houston, Texas, to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce annual gathering to receive the Siemens Award for most sustainable mid-sized city. The point of telling you all this, in addition to bragging as a mayor, but really the point in telling you this is to say that the action is in cities. That's where you look today to find real work getting done around climate protection, around environmental sustainability, around economic and social equity. Don't look to the federal government to save the world. Don't look to the state governments to save the world. It's cities that are saving the world. And we're doing it one city at a time. The 31 cities in the state of Michigan that have committed themselves by covenantal pledge to the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, nine of whom are here represented by their mayors in the room this morning, are all working on a document that mirrors the Kyoto Protocol, the 12 elements of the Kyoto Protocol. Are we all working on all 12? No. But we're working on 1 or 2 or 4 or 6. And we're making progress. And to the extent that we can begin to collect that data and aggregate it, we can start to show the progress that we're making as cities go about saving the world. And that should be enough for me and a chance to segue to our speakers this morning, our keynote speakers. First of all, the lovely lady whose picture is here on the green page of your program, the DNRE director, Becky Humphreys, is unfortunately not with us today. She is in New Mexico, Marty, at a funeral for a family member, and sends her regrets and apologies that she couldn't join us, but we know she's at the right place right now. Stepping into that breach to fill it, and fill it admirably, I'm sure, is Jim Sygo, who's the Deputy Director of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and the Environment. Mr. Sygo was appointed Deputy Director of Environmental Protection in this newly created DNRE in January of this year. And as Deputy Director, he has oversight of the Air Quality Division, the Groundwater Division, and the Remediation Division. Mr. Sygo has a bachelor's degree in meteorology and oceanography and a master's degree in oceanography from the University of Michigan. Ladies and gentlemen, join me please in welcoming Jim Sygo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Heartwell. Well, filling breaches seems to be something I've been doing lately, because I know we've had a lot of activities going on with the department, and it just seems like there just aren't enough people to cover all the events that we've been involved with lately. And you'll have to excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather when I got this assignment, so we'll try to get through the comments that have been prepared for Director Humphreys. And again, I know she sends her regrets that she couldn't make it here today. But I would like to thank you and welcome you all again regarding this important gathering that's been put together for looking at sustainability and climate change. There's a book that many of you may be familiar with. It's called Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. The book is made up of a number of chapters by different authors, basically, and it reflects defining moments in their lives. And because of the crucial and breakthrough issues that came about as part of conversations that they had. Crucial conversations are defined in the book as discussions between two or more people that, one, where the stakes are very high, the opinions are varied, and the emotions run strong. I'd say that pretty much sums up climate change. I think you get all three of those characteristics basically when you're evaluating climate change. Everybody has their own opinion, and it's quite varied. Today you'll have an opportunity to hold many of those significant, crucial conversations about climate change, and this conference is a platform that hopefully will be a defining moment for many of you. As Stephen Chavez writes in his foreword of this book, we face the stresses of highly sensitive challenges. We must find better ways and solutions that represent not my way and not your way, but our way of building capacity that results in better relationships, better decision making, and ultimately better solutions for our communities. We've got much at stake here, and as you know it's something that we all need to concentrate on. What I'd like to do is to try to focus on the topics of our natural resources and environment, some of what we've done, some of the things that we've done up to today anyway in dealing with climate change, and also talk a little bit about some of the next steps we hope to take. Our abundant natural resources help shape Michigan's economy. However, as the global climate change effect continues and takes place, many of these culturally and environmentally and economically viable resources may be endangered. Let me just recap some of the climate change projections that we're anticipating for Michigan. Number one, probably a 5 to 10 degree Fahrenheit increase in rise in winter temperatures. To some extent, we've seen some of that moving slowly. We also are looking at a 7 to 13 degree Fahrenheit rise in temperatures by the end, for the summer, by the end of the 21st century. 2, overall warmer and drier climates due to increased rates of evaporation, not decreased precipitation. Number 3, we're going to see more frequent flooding, more extreme weather events, heavy rainstorms in particular. I think we're experiencing some of that already. The growing season is expected to be extended from 8 to 10 weeks longer. We're also anticipating significant declines in ice cover, and that would be both for the Great Lakes as well as inland lakes within the state of Michigan. There are, of course, many other impacts that we're anticipating, some of which may be to wildlife and will be associated with climate change. Forests with trees such as spruce and firs are expected to shrink, and other forest species such as aspen and birch are likely to expand northward. An increase in the resident bird population with warmer temperatures could increase competition for resources for migratory songbirds. We're anticipating an increased stress in moose, which are already at the southernmost range in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. We're anticipating an establishment of greater forest pests and wildlife diseases with milder temperatures that would be expected as part of climate change. There's also anticipated to be other aquatic impacts associated with this. Overall, there will be a great potential for growth and expansion of fisheries. But before you get out there and get your licenses, what you need to know is that the distributional shifts with cold water species moving northward and deeper in the water, and warmer species replacing the vacated habitat spaces of those other species. Expansion of the species will be limited by certain factors. Those factors include oxygen-depleted waters or oxygen-deprived waters and lower productivity in the food chain that's associated with the water columns. There'll also be potential for spread of aquatic invasive species and disease and fundamental changes in the native fisheries that currently exist. What I'd like to do next is talk a little bit about what we've already done, some of the items we've been able to accomplish. I'd like to spotlight a couple of the things that we've completed thus far. And in Michigan, we've already taken steps through the Climate Action Plan that was prepared several years ago now. The Department of Natural Resources and Environment is participating in a greenhouse gas integrated project team. That team is a statewide state, tribal, and environmental protection agency collaborative formed to help, amongst other things, the EPA develop a data collection system that's needed to implement EPA's mandatory reporting rule. This is a reporting rule that deals with greenhouse gas emissions in large sources and suppliers in the U.S. The DNRE also, along with the Department of Transportation, has recently taken an action. Department of Transportation and the Department of Technology and Management and Budget have taken action in preparing an engine idling policy for all state employees as part of their Eco Driver program. This will help in terms of the events that are associated with managing the state fleet and motor vehicles, buses, and heavy equipment that's utilized by the state of Michigan. Of particular interest to municipalities, the Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth, Bureaus of Construction Codes, is in the process of revising Michigan's commercial and residential building codes upward to meet national standards. This will result in overall energy improvements for the Michigan's newly constructed commercial and residential buildings. A tentative time frame that they're projecting to have these codes updated is later this fall. Regardless of the status of the building codes, however, state government has already taken and decided to move ahead by example. Michigan's most energy efficient building opened last year in Bay City, Michigan. The 25,000 square foot office that houses the state's DNRE's Saginaw Bay District headquarters, along with an office for the Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth, was constructed. As part of that, as far as we know, it's the only platinum-rated LEED building office building within the state of Michigan, and one of the only in about one of about 5 that exist within the United States. A 50-watt wind turbine has been assembled at the site, and it's now providing 30% of the building's power. There are also plans to provide for a 10-kilowatt solar array, and those plans are pending a grant that's in the process of being prepared for that particular project. Together with the wind and solar power being provided at that office, we expect 60% of the building's electrical needs to be met. In addition to that, we're collaborating with Saginaw Valley State University, and they'll be monitoring the building's energy use to provide information to local commercial contractors and municipalities that are interested in similar types of projects. Another accomplishment that the state's completed is a state and tribal climate action accord. This was established in 2009 under an intergovernmental accord between the tribal leaders of the federally recognized Indian tribes in Michigan and Governor Granholm to address climate change issues. The accord serves as a forum to share ideas and propose action plans to address climate change and energy efficiency. The DNR is the lead agency for dealing with this accord, and we've already had several meetings with the tribal groups at this point. The DNRE will also begin to evaluate the plant and animal adaptation to climate change. This is of a particular interest statewide. Why is the climate change adaptation important for Michigan wildlife? Climate determines the distribution and abundance of wildlife throughout the state of Michigan. Climate change appears to be accelerating to the point that it should be considered over a scale of years and decades as opposed to centuries and millennia. We We also know that the effects of climate change will likely vary across ecosystems throughout the state of Michigan. The DNRE is also focusing on what that means to both the fish and wildlife within the state. DNRE wildlife biologists are currently evaluating vulnerabilities in wildlife and plant species to climate change. They're using a tool that assigns a score to species based on their characteristics that increase its sensitivities to the climate change that they're experiencing. All of the results that we're generating out of this particular project and model will be shared with other states. We're also updating our department's wildlife action plan to incorporate climate adaptation planning for Michigan's fish and wildlife species. Public meetings are in the process of being planned so that stakeholders can be part of that process. Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding has recently been provided for a multi-year project which will help us to develop adaptation strategies for a number of vulnerable sectors of the environment. The project will assess changes in climate and weather extremes, including lake effect snow and the hydrology of the Great Lakes Basin for the mid to the late 21st century. The analysis of these relationships between large-scale atmospheric circulation patterns in the Great Lakes and water levels will also be part of that analysis. The project will be conducted by DNRE staff. I'm still getting used to that term of DNRE. It's always been DNR or DEQ for me. But the project will be conducted by the DNRE staff in collaboration with the University of Wisconsin. And I'm very happy to say that the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has also funded this project because of their approval of the models that were going to be utilized, so that other areas of Great Lakes states could be incorporated so that we actually have a model for all of the Great Lakes Basin. The climate project will be our first project under a newly formed cooperative relationship with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to jointly coordinate climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts. The memorandum of understanding that we prepared and have signed with the state of Wisconsin was just recently signed by Director Franks of the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and Environment there, and that signature just came in this week. A significant part of this coordination effort will involve an expansion of the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts projects that has state government working with key municipalities, universities, and industry to try to prioritize, acquire funding, and address climate change adaptation issues. Our intent is to include other states to participate in what eventually would be a Great Lakes regional collaborative, and that's where we're trying to head to. Adaptation strategies have already begun in other areas of the state government. For example, the DNRE has recently participated with the Michigan Department of Community Health on its Centers for Disease Control funded project to develop state strategic plans to address the public health impacts for climate change. Heat events and water quality issues are top concerns for all partners within the state of Michigan, and the strategic planning meetings that have been generated as part of the Michigan Department of Community Health's efforts have resulted in three major goals. Number one, that climate change be recognized as public health issues and be integrated into the local public health practices. Number two, that public health agencies must have climate adaptation tools, resources, and response activities within their existing programs. And number three, that vulnerable populations, especially in the major urban areas, must be explicitly considered in adaptation programs and policies. The draft strategy plans with the actions achievable within them, are expected to be available within the next 2 years, that would be evaluated over the next 2 years, is expected to be available at the end of this month. DNRE has also begun to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions by the creation of new and modification of existing programs. And I'd like to provide you a couple of examples of that. Historically, we've provided pollution prevention grants. Well, this year, the DNRE has recently awarded $246,500 to community pollution prevention grant funding to 5 municipalities for projects that focus specifically on climate action planning. The grant requires municipalities to develop a greenhouse gas inventory and a plan that addresses emissions, climate, and energy challenges that they're facing. The municipalities that have received these grants this year have been Ann Arbor, Dearborn, Hazel Park, Southgate, and Ypsilanti. The DNRE has also responded to Governor Granholm's Green Chemistry Initiative, which encourages the use of safer chemical alternatives to hazardous substances. As an example, one of 12 principles of green chemistry is to design chemical processes for energy efficiency, such as the ability to synthesize products at ambient temperatures and pressures, and things of that nature will generally result in less energy being utilized and less greenhouse gases being produced. To promote these concepts, the DNRE has established a green chemistry program and convened a green chemistry roundtable, which has met twice now and comprised of experts representing business, academia, environmental interest groups, as well as the general public. So what are the next steps that we can take to move this agenda forward? Our natural resources, as I mentioned earlier, and the environment contribute to the quality and also to the economic welfare of the state. The natural resources help shape the state's economy and will continue to do so as our state, with help from municipalities, transform this economy that we're currently in. We have a $20 billion industry in terms of our natural resources. Our forests contribute $12 billion to the state's economy each year. Other recreational activities such as hunting, fishing, wildlife watching, snowmobiling, boating, and visiting our state parks generates another $8 billion each year. This is why it's incumbent upon us to manage our natural resources in accordance with climate change. We believe that Michigan, with strong leadership roles exemplified by the municipalities, is a unique position to galvanize and develop not only the green chemistry, but also other energy alternatives as well. While the list of accomplishments to date might seem impressive, there's still very much to do under these considerations, basically. For example, we needed to incorporate climate change adaptation into many of our Michigan's climate action strategies. While the Wildlife Action Plan is one potential project that we've moved forward with, there are many other vulnerable species out there and other vulnerable sectors of the environment that we need to plan for. Water resources, law enforcement, forests, urban areas, and other aspects for our environment and human health will be impacted and must likewise be addressed. We need to think innovatively and consider making decisions in a more collaborative way so that better decisions are made, and we need to utilize the experts that we have not only in government but certainly within our universities and our municipalities. We all need to do this and engage into these crucial conversations because the cost is just simply too high not to do that. And again, I'm sure that's why we're all here today. So I'd like to thank you very much again, and I hope you have a good day in your collaborations and your discussions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sygo. That's you certainly more than filled the breach. We appreciate your being here, and thank you for those remarks. If we have some opportunity following our next speaker for some question and response, we'll bring Jim back up. Next, you're going to hear from Martin J. Chavez, three-term mayor of Albuquerque, New Mexico, former mayor of Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is was touted as the mayor, as the one of the nation's greenest mayors. Marty, I always considered you the second greenest mayor in America. He is now the executive director of ICLEI-USA, which is an initiative that I'm sure Marty will tell us more about, but is a collaboration among local governments across this country and actually around the world on sustainability. He leads the the growing national movement of U.S. cities, towns, and counties that are taking action to combat climate change, save energy, create green jobs, and better their communities. Former Mayor Chavez, once a mayor, always a mayor. Mayor Chavez responded to this invitation to come here. We're very grateful for that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Martin Chavez.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be relatively brief. I know that I'm standing between many of you in a bio break that's probably needed. I am really pleased for this is my first trip to Grand Rapids. And when you grow up in the Southwest, you get all these preconceived notions of what goes on in this part of the country. And boy, what a gorgeous town this is. And I did take the opportunity. First thing I got in yesterday afternoon to walk along the river, to walk through the downtown. The cities are absolutely alive, and you can tell in pretty short order which cities really care about themselves, where the people are excited about their communities, and it's clear that Grand Rapids is that way. It's funny, and this is for the folks from Grand Rapids, sometimes you don't see your mayor the way that other people see them, because the relationship is much more personal. It's about whether or not the trash is getting picked up, whether those basic services are being handled. And I want to tell you that from the outside looking in at your mayor, because I've known him for many, many years now, he is a leader in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and extraordinarily well respected. And when other mayors look at communities, of course, the first thing we do is look at the mayor. Who's the mayor? What is he or she doing? And your mayor is indeed the greenest mayor in this country. See, I'm not afraid of Rich Daley. I am afraid of Bloomberg, but that's a different different conversation. I know that there are at least a handful of politicians here, so I wanted to share a poll that I got online last night. It's the season, you know, and once a politician, always a politician. But I think it perhaps highlights and exemplifies some of the problems that we have and challenges that we have. So this is a national poll. They asked Americans what they felt the most important issues were confronting the United States. 55% cited the economy, 16% education, 12% public safety, 10% traffic congestion types of issues, and then 3% other, and then 4% didn't know what the most important issues in America were. And so what the pollsters did is they wanted to drill down on this, and they looked at those who didn't know what the most important issues. So they asked them, why don't you know? This is important in communication and public service. 60% understandably said they need more information. 38% said they don't care. 12% of those that didn't know the most important issues didn't know when they would or why they don't know. So they said, well, when will you know? 72% said soon. 18% said never. 10% don't know when they will know. So they drilled down even further, because this is what pollsters do, and asked, well, what's a gender breakdown here? 47% of the don't knows were male, 49% female. 4% of those that did not know what gender they were. Now, the good news is when they looked at those who didn't know their gender, they found that 100% of them served in the United States Senate. None from Michigan. I don't know. I pick on the U.S. Senate and the Congress because at ICLEI we are extraordinarily disappointed with the fact that we have no comprehensive energy policy today in the United States of America. With the challenge that we have, and this isn't a partisan statement, it's just a statement of failure of federal government. No energy policy. ICLEI has 7 offices around the country. We are, as you've probably already determined, the worst named organization in the history of nonprofits. But we opened up in Washington a year ago to avail ourselves of the new conversation. Sustainability, what's going on the Hill, what's going on at the White House, because it seems to be on the radar screen. And I can tell you, at this point, nothing's going on in those areas. It is, and that's the premise of ICLEI, exactly where it was before. It's in local and state government. That's who's getting it done. It's in the private sector. That's who's getting it done. I think we all, as Americans, hope that we'll get some meaningful policies that come out of Washington so we have those partnerships there. They are very important to what we do. But regardless of what they do, we keep doing what we're doing. And I have to tell you, it's a demonstration of extraordinary leadership from Mayor Heartwell to gather people from around the state to have this conversation. How many here have been to China? And that's a good little number. I wish that every American would go to China and take a look at what they are doing. They are beating us in almost every regard. And I had the opportunity to attend a World Economic Forum meeting in New York just a few weeks ago. And World Economic Forum divvies up the world economy in different segments. And they gave a report. Well, this is where the money that's available for investment is. And this is where the opportunity is. And they didn't select real estate as an opportunity right now. Surprise to surprise. Said the #1 place, if you want to make money today in the United States of America or globally, is in clean technology. That's the future. And that's where China is at right now. And I see from working the booths and talking to folks last evening at the reception, that's where many of you are going. And I want to tell you, that's what's going on around the country, too, at the local level. If we just had some assistance with federal policy that facilitated that type of investment. And that's what I wanted to focus on this morning, is what you do around sustainability that actually contributes to the financial bottom line. I know that there's not a mayor in America that isn't looking at cuts. We don't have the luxury of printing presses as Washington does. We have to balance budgets. And it's all about tough decisions. It's so easy to say no to a bad program. They rarely come across your desk. It's saying no to good programs and prioritizing for a community. So let's see where I have the clicker. I'm assuming it's the top one. There isn't one on the side. Okay. So that's ICLEI. We are 605 local governments around the country. Actually, we are global. I want to take you through a little deal. These are slides that I swiped off the internet, and I want to give credit where credit's due. These are from a group called 1920-21. It's an extraordinary collaboration. The hook is 19 cities that will have 20 million population within the 21st century. Frederick Turner wrote those marvelous books about U.S. history and said, the history of America is the history of the frontier, go west, young man, all of that stuff. And it was entertaining, but it wasn't real, because the history of America may have been informed by the frontier in part or in spirit, but the real history of America is the history of cities. It's not the history of people leaving the city to go to the farm. There's a couple of communes left in New Mexico, but they're not really doing that well. It's a history of people coming from the farm and the ranch to the city. We do that because we're social creatures. We like to be together. We do better when we're together. We create wealth when we are together. So if you go back to the year 1000, I guess the happening place was Córdoba, Spain, and then you advance forward to 1500, and you see the population shifting and Asia taking on more importance. 1800, you see the continual shift. But it's all about the growth of cities. And this project in particular is a 5-year project to understand cities, how they work, how they relate to each other, and to find common ways of comparing them, apples to apples. All of a sudden we get to the 1900s, and here we come in the United States, starting to dominate the world through the strength and vibrancy of our cities. 1950, well, it starts to change a little bit. We're still right there. 2005, whoops, dramatic shift in population center. And to understand the future of economies, you have to understand where cities are going. And cities, I know you're aware of this, Mayor, but cities don't exist in the U.S. Constitution. Counties don't exist in the U.S. Constitution. We still divide by 50 in the United States of America. But business people don't divide by 50. Economics are at work on a regional basis. Money flows, capital flows, where it can find its highest return. ICLEI is on 6 continents. We are big, bad, not-for-profit, exclusively local governments. Our global headquarters is in Bonn, and we work primarily around mitigation, adaptation, and sustainability. I'll talk briefly about adaptation because it's kind of a sad story, but an important story if we deal with reality. These are our 7 offices. Actually, we have 8. We just opened in Los Angeles this last month. And over 600 local governments. This is our board. Some of you know them. Pat Hayes, North Little Rock. Pegeen Hanrahan just left office, Gainesville. Frank County from Des Moines. Mike Nutter from Philadelphia. And then we have city councilors, county executives from around the country. Good people. Dow Constantine just joined. He's from King County. His successor, or his predecessor rather, is the Deputy Secretary of HUD now in the current administration. So these are our Michigan mayors and members, and I want to thank you and commend you and congratulate you and buy you lunch. And for those who aren't, we need you to sign up. This is what we do. We assist you in performing climate action plans, sustainability plans. We track energy use, funding sources. We do staff training. And then when you join ICLEI, you join a network of people. So what's the best practice? Who's doing something really well in retrofits, in weatherization, you name it. We can tell you what communities are doing well and what things you may want to avoid as you go down this path. We provide the tools, the software, because all of us that do this know that if you don't measure it at the beginning, you can't judge whether you have a successful outcome. You have to have a science-based premise, which the previous speaker alluded to. So often anymore we want to kind of ignore science, and that is so anti-American. It's indescribable. That's how we advanced, through a scientific process of understanding the world around us, the natural environment, the built environment, how it relates to itself. And science tells us that what we're doing is not sustainable. We have got to change it. I think it was Buckminster Fuller said that you can't prevail fighting the existing reality. If you want to change things, build a different model that makes the old model obsolete. That's what they're doing in other countries. That's what we have to do in America. At least that's the belief at ICLEI. We take our members through a 5-step process. For those of you who are in management, this is a pretty traditional management process. But essentially, you do an inventory. What are your emissions? And particularly for a municipal organization, and I know that the elected officials know this, if you're not actually doing it, if you're not an example that you want folks to emulate and follow, they're not going to follow. The public smells hypocrisy very quickly, so you've got to do it yourself. So what are your emissions? 2, where do you want to be? 3, what's your plan? I would invite you, if it's not around here, but to get online. The Grand Rapids plan is an extraordinary plan. It has a lot of what I think some would probably call extraordinarily socialistic and communistic things like complete 100% of accounting, collections, and disbursements within 3 business days of receipt. Ensure that 95% of requests for encroachment and TOP permits are processed within 5 days. Real things, the real things of local government that actually result in savings. And then 4, implementation of the plan. 5, monitoring that plan. It's very simple. And when you get through that process, which takes a number of years, well then, where are you at? What successes have you had? You look where you haven't had this success, and you start the wheel all over again. It's a good process. And what's interesting about it is that it is in itself transformational. You find that people start thinking about things in a different way. Their goals are different. And that indeed is part of our challenge at ICLEI, and I think as a country, is to change the way we do things. So here's some examples. I won't dwell on them at length, but Chatham County, Georgia, $30,000 in annual savings because they changed their water heating systems. And I know they're building engineers here. It's real. It's real. And in a tough economy, the quickest thing to realize money, to find savings, is efficiency. It's always efficiency. So this is all about the bottom line. New green jobs, whatever a green job may be, that's a different conversation as well. Water treatment plant in Houston, $769,000 in annual savings. Not bad. They leased the equipment, they paid the equipment back with the savings. Tampa, Florida, methane, and I think most of you are familiar, and most of us are familiar with now that you can capture methane. And if you look at all these things, they're all positive. These formerly known as pollutants are actually energy sources if we complete the loop. LA, $10 million annual savings. And this one they got through the Clinton Climate Initiative. But they just changed out the lights. 1994, I first got elected. I had folks from Johnson Control come in, and of course, nobody was talking about climate change in those days, but certainly I was looking at the bottom line financially. And they said, you know, if we change your light bulbs out, we'll just pay ourselves through the savings, your reduced energy costs. And I thought, that sounds like a pretty good idea. It's probably not true because it seems too good. So I brought my engineers up, because that's what mayors do. You have your engineers come in and say, well, is this real? Can we do this? And they said, it's real, Mr. Mayor, but you don't need them. We'll do it for you. 3 years later, we changed out about 8% of the light bulbs at City Hall. It clearly wasn't working. We would have done a better job by investing and partnering with the private sector on that one. It's complete today. Employee education. 40 to 48% of carbon emissions in a building are the construction and the operation of the building. So unless we're operating these buildings properly, we're not going to get the savings. We used to have a joke at City Hall, and that is we couldn't put motion sensors in City Hall for the lighting because we were concerned about a half hour after lunchtime, the lights would go dark at City Hall. That's a joke. Chicago, Illinois, $10.7 million in savings, and they funded this themselves as well as with the private sector. Plus, they avoided the consequences of dumping pollutants. And that's one thing I was struck by the previous speaker, and in the conversations I've had since I got here. There's a really good sensitivity to ecosystems and biodiversity and the importance that those have ultimately in whether or not we're financially successful. And of course, Ann Arbor, the mayor, talked about what he's doing in Grand Rapids right here. And it's all wonderful things. So if you're a business looking to locate, where do you go? Do you go where they're burning religious books? Or do you go where they're investing in themselves, where they're doing things that are creative? And Richard Florida, who wrote Rise of the Creative Class, went through all the cities of America and identified their creativity and related that to their economic productivity. And guess what? It's a straight line. Those cities that invest in themselves, invest in their human infrastructure with universities, with high schools, that invest in themselves through healthcare like Grand Rapids is, that attracts more things than burning religious books. Adaptation is an unfortunate reality today. Adaptation is what you do when you didn't mitigate. And we know that no matter what we do, if we do everything right, starting at noontime, there are going to be some irreversible changes in our climate. And again, at ICLEI, we believe that the world should be science-based. And the overwhelming scientific evidence is that climate change is real. But even if you don't believe in it, for those few left on the Flat Earth Society, everybody agrees we're hopelessly addicted to foreign oil. That's a quote of George Bush. Hopelessly addicted to foreign oil. Wouldn't it be nice, and I've never been so cynical to think that we've ever gone to war over oil, but I've never been so naive as to believe that these initiatives overseas weren't at least informed in part by this addiction. Wouldn't it be nice just to tell them no? I don't know how many of you have been in Saudi Arabia and some of the oil-rich companies, but they're building marvelous things, and they're building them around concepts of sustainability, by the way. It's not their money. It's our money. Imagine if that money was invested here. I attended a conference last week in Aspen called R Day, A-R-E-D-A-Y. And there was a panel, some interesting guys. It was Sam Wiley, he's a billionaire, under indictment, I believe. Ted Turner, he's a billionaire. And T. Boone Pickens. These are some pretty serious capitalists, all billionaires. Actually, after that commitment that they're going to give half their wealth to charity, a number of us had little signs that said charity on our foreheads. And their whole premise was give us the means, the regulatory means, to invest our money in clean tech, in alternative and renewable energy. And they said, we don't even want a subsidy. Forget subsidies for wind or solar. Just take the subsidies away from oil and gas. Let's just compete with them straight on, and we'll beat them. And we'll create jobs for Americans in the process. So we don't do what's right. We have to adapt to what is. If you live on the coast, get ready for increased storms and flooding. If you live in the Southwest where I live, get ready for droughts. What are we going to do? And we all know that the state of infrastructure in this country, I'm not talking just about the roads, I'm talking about what's underground, is really bad because we haven't invested in the infrastructure. Let's start investing in it. What's interesting about adaptation, when you start working it, you come back right to the conclusion that the cheapest way to adapt is to mitigate in the first place. And that's a nice way to have that conversation with people. Again, you have to go through a process. You have to measure it. It has to be real. I mean, in tough economies, in all economies, it's got to be real. And again, if you're looking at attracting wealth into a community, businesses don't deal in dreams. They deal in reality. So that is ICLEI. We are proud of what we do. We, at times, are controversial, but we are exclusively local governments, and we are committed to sustainability around the triple bottom line. Very important. We had fun about 3 weeks ago in Colorado. And we are, by the way, not-for-profit, totally nonpartisan. But the GOP candidate for governor called us out and said that Mayor Hickenlooper was trying to take over the world through the UN ICLEI for our bicycle program because we believe that bicycles are an important form of alternative transportation. And he got a lot of chuckles around the country, and we noticed on Monday when the GOP in Colorado came out with their list of endorsed candidates, their nominee for governor was not on it. And most of them switched over to Mayor Hickenlooper, who, by the way, is competing with Mayor Heartwell to be the greenest mayor in America. I think he's going to be the greenest governor in America next month. So I'm happy to take some questions. If I've offended, I intended to. Because I'm not running.
Marty, thank you. Can you come up? Stay right here, and we'll take a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of questions for either Mr. Sygo or Mr. Chavez. Questions? Yes. Marty.
Oops, great. There's a lot of conversation, debate around the CO2 emissions equivalencies of methane and landfills. What are your metrics saying about that? And what,
Well, methane, of course, is one of the more noxious of the greenhouse gases. What we found, and I just can speak from the Albuquerque experience, is that we're able to simply run the pipe down, capture it, create power. It offset by close to 10% our energy bills. So it paid for itself over, I think, about 11, 12 years. All good. All measurable, all real.
EPA is now changing some of their weighted values of the impact of methane, and also the what landfills are actually able to capture. Any conversation or?
I think you have to analyze each landfill. What its content is. They're pretty much the same, but in terms of how big they are, where they are at in their devolution and degradation, so it depends on how much gas they're going to send out.
Thanks.
And he's an expert.
Oh, that's right. I'm mic'd here. Okay. What I mean, we've actually had proposals in Michigan legislature to start placing yard waste into the landfills to increase the generation of methane. And in Michigan, we do have probably in the neighborhood of 23 different facilities that are now collecting the methane and either generating electricity by pushing it through diesel engines, basically, that have been converted, or they're transporting that methane for other uses. Generally speaking, our concern is that generating more methane by putting grass clippings in it probably isn't the answer, because you can't as effectively collect the methane out of the landfills as you could if you used the grass clippings in a methane generator. Basically, you could put those in a different sphere, basically, and generate methane in that fashion and collect 100% of it. So while I think we can use the methane that is being generated out of landfills, I don't think that's the panacea. And I think you're absolutely right. The impact on the greenhouse gas impact from methane is much stronger than it is from carbon dioxide. So.
One other question? Yes.
We all know that carbon dioxide seems to be one of the major problems. Besides sequestering in the ocean, the other place that it's sequestered is in soil by way of plants. I've heard nothing, even though I realize you're not Department of Agriculture, you're not Department of Highways, you're still in charge of our other parts of our forests and so forth. And until we have programs which stop the governments from using chemicals which damage mycorrhiza, which are the organisms that have to be underneath plants on roots, which do sequester the carbon at a much better rate than anything else we know, forming glomalin into the soil, and until we stop this insanity of chemicals on our lawns and our gardens and our parks and our highways, we're not going to get the sequestration that we need.
Any response, gentlemen, either?
I didn't understand half the words. Okay. No, just as an add-on to it, because you're exactly correct. When y'all go home, Google biochar. It's another way that science has brought us to capture carbon, to put it and sequester it in the soil, and actually to enhance the quality of the soil.
We don't need biochar. We need sustainable methods of growing what we have. And by the way, the biochar companies kind of went under that started about a year ago. But meanwhile, we can do that without the special interest of biochar. We just have to grow things correctly and stop poisoning them so they can do their job of sequestering the carbon dioxide.
Point.
There are some who think you can sequester it with deep injection also, as you might know, and there are some efforts that are ongoing and some demonstration projects that have been ongoing for sequestering in various geological formations. A lot of that's been done as part of oil enhanced recovery and everything, and it seems to have worked successfully, but I don't know that we know what the long-term impacts of that will be at this point.
Nobody appears to want to volunteer their communities either for the...
All right, both Mr. Sygo and Mr. Chavez will be around at least through the break. Marty's going to be with us through the afternoon. So grab them when you got a moment. If you got a question you didn't ask, and take the opportunity to do that. And also join me, please, in thanking both gentlemen for being with us. Thanks, Marty.
All right, we're going to take a quick 11.5-minute break.